This is the program loopsyntax.cpp in your Canvas page. And this is an example that shows you the main differences between the three loops that we'll use in C++. So that's the while loop, the do while loop, and then the for loop. This program doesn't do a whole lot, but hopefully it allows you to see the key syntax differences and then also how you might use the three loops in slightly different occasions. So let me go ahead and run it, and then I'll keep the output next to the program as we go through it. So we have # include IOStream because we're going to be doing input and output, and then in main we're going to print out examples of loops, which printed out here, and then we're going to print out while loop. The \n is just a control character, so it printed a blank line in between examples of loops and while loops. With the while loop, it's going to be doing some kind of either Boolean, so you could have a bool variable in here, or you could have some kind of a conditional statement. So in this case, I've defined a variable I up here on line 11, int I equals 0, and then in my while loop, I'm testing to see if I is less than 10. So the first time I run the loop, I is 0, so it's less than 10. So as long as this is true, then this loop executes. Notice that you have an open brace and a closed brace. The body of the loop, the statements that are inside the loop, have to be in between the open brace and the closed brace. Also, you'll notice that there's no semicolon after the statement line 17 that has the while loop. It's just while, your conditional inside parentheses, no semicolon, and then the open brace. So inside the brace, I'm going to print out counter equals, and then I'll print out the value of I, so it gives me a 0 initially, and then an end line. Now with the while loop, I have to manually change the variable inside the loop. Otherwise, I just stays 0, and the loop ends, and it goes back, and I is still less than 10 if it's 0, and then it keeps going, so it would create an infinite loop. But I can advance the value of I either by using an equation or by using this increment operator. So this I++ means take the value of I and just add 1 to it every time we go through the loop. This is a single statement, the I++, so it needs a semicolon after it. So we're going to go through the loop. I is 0. We get the I of 0 printed out. We go through the loop again with the I incremented now to 1, and then it increments the I again to 2, and so forth. We get the I equal to 9 though, and then when we go through the loop where I is equal to 9, it prints out counter is equal to 9. Then it increments I to 10, and then as soon as I is 10, it fails the test because it's a less than, not a less than, or equals. And so since I is now equal to 10, it fails the test, and so it skips from the top of the while loop back down to line 23 and then just continues executing the program. Let's take a look and see what a do while loop does. So there are some similarities. The while and the do while loop, they still have the conditional, but the do while starts with the keyword do, and then notice there's no semicolon on line 29. And then you've got the open brace, the statements inside the do while loop, and then the close brace. The while then goes after the close brace, and you could put it on the same line or you could put it on the next line. Remember, C++ doesn't really view a line as being completed until it hits that semicolon. But usually you'll see it on the same line as the close brace. So then we have our while, j is less than 10, and then because this is finishing a statement, it needs a semicolon. If you put a semicolon up here on the while loop, then the entire while loop would become line 17. The semicolon here means that the entire line 29 through 33 is the do while. So it's a little bit different syntax. It's a little bit hard to get used to, but just keep reminding yourself, while loops take a semicolon, do while loops take a semicolon, while loops do not take a semicolon. And then with the do while loop, the test is at the end. And so when it goes through, it's going to go through with j is equal to 0, because that's what we set it to here. And it'll print out j, then increment j to 1, and then test and see is 1 less than 10. Yes, it is. So then it'll go back up and print out the 1, and then increment j to 2, and then test. So let's think through what's going to happen when j is equal to 9 here. So while j is less than 10, 9 is less than 10, so that's fine. So it goes back up and goes back through the loop and prints out counter is equal to 9. And then it increments j to 10, and it goes through the while loop. It goes through the while statement, and then 10 is not less than 10, so it fails the test. So that's the other difference between the while loop and the do while loop. Both are testing a conditional, but with the while loop, the test is at the top before the statements. With the do while loop, the test is at the bottom after the statements. But we can use a simpler loop when we know how many times we need to go through the loop. So for these types of loops, really this for loop would be the better way to do it. So let's look at the for loop. The reason the for loop initially looks a little more complicated, but the nice thing about the for loop is everything's all on one line here. So we do the keyword for, then we open parentheses. We define our variable right inside the for loop. So int k is equal to 0, and then we need a semicolon to end that statement, but it's inside the parentheses, so it's still part of the declaration of that for. Then we put in our test, so k less than 10, then we need another semicolon. And then we put in our increment or decrement, so k plus plus if we want to increase k, or k minus minus if we want to decrease k, or some kind of equation here if we want to do an equation. Then we do our open brace and our close brace, and then our statements go inside between the open brace and the close brace. So with this one, this goes through, it does k is equal to 0 only once, and then it tests, yes, k is less than k is less than 10. So it passes the test. Then it goes in here and it runs the statements, counter is equal to 0. It comes up here, increments k, so k is 1. It passes the test, and it runs the statement again. So let's do k is equal to 9. So we just got k printed out. It's going to come back up here. It's going to increment k to 10, and then it's going to test it, and it's going to fail the test. So the nice thing about the for loop is everything's all on that one line. The downside of the for loop is it's a little bit confusing because the declaration gets run once where you define the variable and set it equal to the initial condition. The test gets run each time you run through the loop, and then your increment or decrement runs at the end of the statements down here. So that part can get a little bit confusing, but the for loop's a lot easier to use, and it's a lot easier to find your mistakes if you have a mistake in the for loop. Thanks for watching.